regime have inflicted on its own citizens. And 3.6 million of those citizens have now fled, largely into Colombia, to Peru, to Chile, Argentina, all countries that I visited in the last 12 months, all countries where I have seen people living in abject poverty first-hand. But can I just begin by saying I take real objection to the contribution from the honourable member for Glenrothes, where he claimed that members on this benches had in some way celebrated the misery and the human rights abuses taking place to the people of Venezuela. That is both a grotesque and an untrue allegation, Mr Deputy Speaker. It is grotesque and untrue because people on this side of the House know the need the sanctions regime to be introduced.
Wood says, I think the point's made, but I do think we need to get back to where the debate was. It's a very good point that's been hammered home, and I think we do need to move on now. Mark.
Mr Deputy Speaker, so let's move on with the need for sanctions against Venezuela. This is a regime that is not entered hardship as a result of the oil price collapse. It is a regime that has entered hardship because not just under Maduro, but also under Chavez. And the Honourable Lady for Bishop Auckland shakes her head as though it is all down to oil price collapse. Let me tell you, it is not. It is down to the fact that Maduro and his predecessor Chavez played fast and loose with the Constitution. They abused their positions in order to suppress opposition, including within the press, during both Chavez's tenure and Maduro's tenure. To suggest that this is all misery brought about as a result, and I will not give away, I'll come back in a second, to suggest this is all misery brought about by oil price collapse, I'm afraid is being economical with the actuality. Yes.
I'm extremely grateful. Isn't it a fact that the richest person in Venezuela is the daughter of the former President Hugo Chavez, who is a billionaire with about $4 billion US, which has been systematically stolen from the people by this so-called socialist regime.
100% on the money. And that, Mr Deputy Speaker, is the inconvenient truth that many people in opposition fail to recognise. That actually you've got massive abuses that went on well before economic price collapse, and one of the reasons why sanctions are needed. I will give way to the honourable gentleman.
And in support of his case, has he also noticed that it isn't just the oil price, but the volume of oil produced, that they have so trashed their industry and failed to invest in it that they now produce a fraction of their potential capacity? That is why they're so poor.
Absolutely right. And the right honourable member for Woking is right to identify the fact that not only has the volume of oil produced, but also that many of the oil workers that would have produced the oil have fled the regime, because many of those people, their families are living in absolute penury as a result of years of neglect and economic mismanagement. But the member for Ilford South is quite right to point out the extreme wealth that has been accumulated corruptly by members of the Chavez, of the military and the Maduro regimes. Much of that money is offshored, including vast amounts in Spain. The property market in areas of Madrid for many years, this is not a new phenomenon, for many years was red hot with money that was flowing out of Venezuela, buying office blocks, residential properties galore, in order to cleanse the money out of Venezuela. And so, as part of any robust sanctions regime, it is not just about making sure that money is prevented from leaving the country as and when now, but also the money that has been leaving for years, including at massive rates under Chavez, which is uncomfortable, clearly, to the honourable lady, the member for Bishop Auckland. But that money that was leaving at that stage, money that was stolen from the people of Venezuela, that money needs, as part of any sanction regime, to be taken back in. And if we are talking about laughter, we're seeing great laughter, made for the record, from the honourable lady, the member for Bishop Auckland, because it is either something she finds funny or something she fails to understand. I will give way.
I only want to illustrate one particular fact, which I found the most harrowing, following on from that earlier intervention, is that there they are now turning aid lorries away from the borders in Venezuela because they're worried that they will lose their control and their grip. If anything defines what an absence of humanity in is exactly that point which the honourable gentleman has made.
And we've got quite a lot of other speakers. Mark Menzies.
Thank you very much. And Mr Speaker, I hear your guidance and I know that there is much pressure on time. But I would encourage the Government not only to enact this SI with regards to sanctions of Venezuela, but also to ensure that whilst we're still a member of the EU and whilst our reach through the United Nations, that we are making sure that the sanctions regime targets particularly those in the military and the senior members of the Maduro and Chavez regimes that have stolen billions from the people of that country and get that money back to the people where it belongs. Yes, I'll give away.
I pay tribute to the work he does in Latin America. Would he not also agree that Petrocaribe was another way of them laundering their money and caused absolute mayhem in many vulnerable countries of the Caribbean?
Absolutely, and I think that point stands well on its own. But, Mr Speaker, in conclusion, may I also say that this should be an opportunity for the House to come together, to send a message of solidarity to Juan Guaido, to the democratically elected members of the Congress of which Maduro has now sought to supersede with his own puppet arrangement. And, Mr Speaker, can I also just say that the suffering in Venezuela is something that no one should ever have to adhere to, and that any sanctions are clearly targeted on the instigators of this corrupt regime. Thank you.
Chris Brown. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. The main issue that we're considering this afternoon is actually what is